As you likely saw, Dr. K here, recording this for those that can't be here and want to learn about grad school. I put a link to this Google Drive, which has different information about just various things related to graduate school that myself and Dr. Arndorfer think may or may not be helpful. So if you have a Fresno State email account, which all of you should, you can just get into it without anything. If you log in from your phone, you might be logged into Gmail, which I have the same problem on my phone. Perhaps just copy the link, put it in an email to yourself, and then open it with your Fresno State email account open and not just a regular Gmail. You can get in, no problem, and I won't have to give you access. There's different stuff in here. Recently, I found some things on Facebook about free or low-cost resources for graduate or even undergraduate students, how to prep if you're poor. That's not my saying. This is from like a Facebook professor group that people are sharing that's helpful. So there's just stuff in there that may or may not be helpful. So you can look at that stuff. Other than that, I'm going to get to our presentation. And one other great thing about the session today, which isn't the norm, usually I might have a couple other professors with me, but today I have a current graduate student at George Mason University, which is technically in Virginia, though I always think it's DC. She graduated from Fresno State as an FBS student. Remind me of the year, but her name is Sam Luna, and she's here. So she is successfully applied to graduate school. She graduated from Fresno State, and she's now in a doctoral program. She earned her master's degree. I'll let her tell you about that because I forget the year, and now she's working towards her doctorate. So one of you guys that went on from Fresno State and is successfully in a doctoral program, say hello, Sam.
Hi, everyone. So I graduated in 2017 from Fresno State, and I'll be going into my 4th year as a PhD student at George Mason. I got my master's last summer in May. And yeah. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about what it's like to currently be in grad school, application process, things like that.
So not just asking myself or other professors that did this longer ago, but she did it more recently and might be more comfortable asking things to her, or just things pop into your mind that she can answer better than I can because I might not even remember. But also she's just going to help me get through this because it's more fun to talk when it's not just me. Also, for everyone else that's here, guess I'll try my best to have the chat open, but feel free to stop us when you need to and ask questions. I don't want you to forget things. I'm going to keep my chat open. I'll try my best to stop when I see things. As I said before, we don't want you to forget your questions, so feel free to interrupt us, or if you want to write it down and then ask later, feel free to ask anything. We're here for you. This is for you guys, obviously, not so much for us. We want to help you guys out. So this is just an infographic about graduate school that I don't necessarily usually go over, but just some information here that might be useful that when I give you, I think I'll put this just in the folder and you guys can look at all these slides later because there's a lot of information here that you might not get to write down in time. One thing that may, well, not necessarily may be helpful, but one of the reasons that people want to potentially go to graduate school is to have a better earning potential, which is also probably because why you decided to go to college potentially, is to have more careers and jobs open to you with higher salaries than just a high school education. So it's true that even across all disciplines, if you go from your bachelor's to your master's to your doctorate, you have higher earning potentials. So that's really just echoing probably something that you already thought of, but this is just showing you the data supports that. Also, something I should say before I get going, usually if we do this during the semester, we'll do one that's more just crim and one that's FBS, which has some psych in it. And because I'm only doing one this summer, I'm just going to do both. So it's very similar, but if you're not interested in psych, there's just going to be a few slides that might not be all that interesting to you. But we try to have all the information here depending, for everybody in our department that might be interested. So this is one that might not be all that interesting to you, but this is for expectations for like psych graduates. So myself, I'm a legal psychologist. So I went to a psychology, I guess technically experimental psychology master's and then PhD program at FIU, which is called Florida International University. It's in Miami, and I learned all about legal psychology, which is like FBS 154. If you've ever taken that class, I think it's awesome. That's actually where I first met Sam as a student in that class. So anyway, that's my educational background. And now Sam is, although she was an FBS student, she is in a criminology master's and PhD program. And even though she likes FBS, she went into a crim program, but she's working with her major advisor, her mentor is, I would say, probably a legal psychologist. He's a psychology background. Tell them about the things that you work on and you study with Dr. Redlick.
Yeah, so I actually chose my program for the advisor, not necessarily for the program itself, because I was more looking towards a legal psychology program. But my advisor ended up fitting really well. She's a psychologist, and we work on things sort of legal decision making, plea bargaining, interrogation things, and more things related to wrongful convictions, but a lot of legal decision making, which is not necessarily the norm in crim programs, but because that's her area and she happened to be in a crim program, that's what I've ended up being able to do.
So she's kind of that bridge between where she was in a crim program but interested in FBS, and then thinking about going into more an FBS program but decided on crim. So we'll talk probably more about that later and how she kind of made those decisions, because it can be difficult to make considering what that opens for your future. But these are things we'll talk about. Basically, I'll think about things as we go through that I forgot to say about myself or ask about her. In terms of finding programs, it is difficult kind of no matter what you're interested in. There's just a lot of different ways to do it potentially. This one is about different salary info for psych. Never mind, I was going down a different tangent. So these are just websites that, again, I'm going to give you the slides so you can look at these things. I'm not expecting you to write these things down. As you might have seen in Crim 1 before, there's lots of different things that you can do as someone that's in FBS. So it would be like a legal or forensic psychologist. All of these things, or most of these things, require an advanced degree, if not a master's degree, a PhD. Though I think we'll get to this eventually, but just because myself and now Sam is in a PhD program, that does not mean that we're saying that everybody should be going to a PhD program. I think it's important that you think about what you want to do in terms of your career, which I know is a super hard question to think about. But if what your career choice is, you only need a master's degree, then there's not really a reason to get a PhD. And it's a lot more time, a lot more mental effort and anguish, and if you don't want to and you don't need to do it for your career, then there's not really a need to. So you really kind of have to think about that before you make these decisions. And we'll kind of talk about that a bit as well. As again, there's lots of different things that you can do. If there's certain things in particular that you're interested in and you want to know more about kind of what graduate school or what kind of programs, that might be something either to ask at the end of this or just to email, or you can set up an appointment with me, or you can talk perhaps with Sam. I'm sure she would be okay with that. So those things are available to you as well. So when I first put this together, I sent out like a survey monkey and I asked the students what questions they had before they were in front of the professor's faces, because you might feel like weird about asking these things. So these were the questions that were there. And so I usually start out with these, and hopefully we answer them as we go through, if not at this point. One of the things that they asked in this is, what do I want to do? Why do I want to do this? Like, we can't answer that for you because we don't know you. And even if we do know you, we don't know what's going on inside your head. So you kind of have to think about what you might like or what you don't like. For example, kind of early on in college, I thought I might want to be a forensic psychologist that treats inmates, and I thought that sounded really cool, and I might like that. But I had a professor that did that, and he told me in the class, not just me, that you have to be prepared to have people that don't want to talk to you, that don't want your help, that won't say thank you. You're being in a dangerous environment sometimes. And I thought to myself, yeah, maybe that's not really something I might want to do. So even finding things you don't want to do can be helpful, and then going towards areas that interest you. You never know. So you kind of have to think about these different things. And really, a lot of what I tell people is, if you think you might be interested, try and find somebody that has that career, or several people, and call them and ask them if they can interview you about it, or interview these people, read up about it. But in general, I find people don't really mind if you try and ask them about their career and what they like or don't like about their job, and that might tell you a lot that you don't know just from searching on the internet. So oftentimes that would be more helpful than talking to me that has never had that job before and I don't really know much. What kind of education or training do you need to achieve them? Like I said before, it depends. If you don't need a PhD, then maybe you shouldn't get it. Do you need licensure? For my career choice and Sam's career choice, we're not going to need to be licensed. But for Dr. Zizian, who's in our department, he is a forensic psychologist, and so he does need to be licensed in the state of California for the type of job that he does. So these are things you have to think about. Do you need just an MS, which is a master's degree? Do you need a PhD versus a PsyD? We'll talk about that a little bit. How do you find different programs? I'll probably have Sam talk a little bit about how she found them, but mostly with PhD programs, they're going to be what we call Research One institutions. PhD programs are not in CSUs unless they're, I forget how they say it, like practitioner type programs. Like we have physical therapy PhD at Fresno, or nursing practitioner maybe. But any kind of PhD like psych and crim are going to be at UCs or like a Stanford or schools like that. So different schools have the ability to have PhD programs. So that's why Fresno State doesn't have a PhD program, but we have master's programs. Professional schools would be something like Alliant, where they're only for profit, and so they're going to cost a lot more money, and we can talk about pros and cons to that. And then terminal master's programs would be like a Fresno State, where that's as far as you can go. We only offer masters and not anything further, and so that would be a terminal master's program. Sam, why don't you talk a little bit about how you found programs and how do you know which to apply to or stuff like that?
So the thing that I kind of started with as my base was the American Psychology Law Society has a list of graduate programs related to psychology and law, and I kind of started with that program and then branched off because I initially thought that I wanted to do something more related to FBS specifically, and I wasn't necessarily looking at criminology programs. Another way I looked for programs was I looked at specific people, and then by looking at those people and what work that they did, looked at what institutions they were at and found the institutions that way. So finding research articles that were really related to what I was interested in researching in graduate school, finding the authors of those papers and seeing what institutions were they were at, if they had a graduate program and things like that. But really, when it came down to deciding which schools to apply to, it was really based off of the people that I wanted to work with. And definitely the school plays a role in that as well. But the big piece for me was definitely the person that I wanted to work with at that institution.
And so something I forgot to say before this, it's like usually I do it with Dr. Arndorfer and Dr. Pickering, and I think the three of us have the memory of how this goes. And so I think I'm forgetting some parts because that was theirs. But with PhD programs, you usually apply to work with a person. And so because Sam knew she wanted to go into a PhD program, she knew that she needed to look for a person to work with. But if you're looking for a master's program, you don't necessarily need to do that. You look for the type of program and what you're going to study there. So for Fresno State, for example, we have a criminology, just like general criminology program where you get like the breadth of, theory and some more specific classes on things as electives are available. Or if you want to do psych, it's more of an experimental psych program. I had a few students this year. I wrote letters of recommendation. I know one applied to and was accepted to like a Homeland Security kind of program out of Arizona State University, I believe. So there's different programs, and that the focus of that program is Homeland Security. And so there's going to be lots of classes that are designed around that. And so his degree is going to be more specific than just a general criminology, but that's what he wants for his future career and where he wants to go. So you have to think about, do you want something more general that could be applied to a lot of different things like criminology? You could use that master's as a police officer or probation or working as an analyst in a government agency, or who knows, like criminology is pretty broad. You could arguably still do that with a Homeland Security master's as well, but these are things you need to think about. But again, for masters, it's like the program and the topic, like criminology or Homeland Security or psychology, but a PhD program is certainly what your degree is going to say, which for me is, psychology, for Sam will be criminology, but the whole point of a PhD program is doing research. A lot of it is that, and who you're working with and who you're mentored by is a huge part of that. So knowing about those two things is going to be important as you're looking at schools. So if you're master's, again, looking at the types of programs that interest you, perhaps looking at the type of people that are there in case you want to do a master's thesis. But that's not necessarily as important. You don't need someone there that does stuff on rapport, which is what I do. It's not like people are coming to Fresno State to work it with me, but if it was a PhD program, they would be coming to the program because I'm there potentially, and then the other professors. So just something to think about. How many programs you apply to, it depends on a few different things. One, if you think that you're interested in the programs, I would say apply to them. But you are hindered a little bit by money because it does take money to apply to programs. You have to pay for transcripts that are official, potentially pay for GRE scores. So these things might stop you from applying to a lot of programs. So that's the only hindrance. When I applied, it was actually like paper applications that I put in the mail. Now it's just online, but still it's money that you have to pay. Sometimes I think it's maybe common that you have to pay for 2 transcripts to go to the same school. I'm like, can't you just share? Why are you making me pay to like double the money to give you transcripts? Anyways.
And there's also application fees.
Oh yeah,
on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it does cost some money, though not as expensive as applying to like law schools or medical schools, but it's something to think about. If you don't have as much money, then applying to schools is going to be a little difficult. But I think I applied to like maybe 6-ish, 7, something like that. I don't know. Do you remember how many you applied to, Sam?
I think was at least 10.
Yeah. So it just depends. And for programs, PhD programs generally accept fewer students per year because they want to fund them, and we'll talk about what that means, but my program may be accepted for maybe 6 a year. Master's programs, there isn't necessarily a limit, at least for hours, but it could be like 15 or 20 people maybe. So it's a lot of differences in terms of how many people they accept. Master's programs, maybe you don't need to apply to as many because your odds are pretty good, versus PhD programs. You might want to apply to as many as you could possibly be interested in to increase your chances of getting into schools. Lastly, how do you know if you're ready for graduate school? I don't think you necessarily feel ready. There might be different things that you have anxiety about. Oftentimes, students don't know how good of students that they are. I think the fact that you're here, especially in summer, speaks to the fact that you are really thinking about this seriously, and that is not something that a lot of students are doing. You can certainly talk to professors and things, but if you think you're doing pretty well in school, GPA, I suppose, has a certain amount of bearing on this, but I would say at least you never really feel completely ready. So it's not like you're going to be like, yes, I'm good to go. But that shouldn't stop you. That shouldn't stop you from doing it. There is going to be some anxiety and some learning about it once you're there, and I'll tell you a little bit about my growing pains. But you're not necessarily going to feel it, but I think that a lot of, or most or all of you are ready, and you will be, and you'll adjust once you get there. You just got to learn about it. So what we're going to do today is talk about the different degrees, as I kind of have a little bit, but we'll go through more specifically. And then a lot of this is about the application process. And the application process is the same across really a lot of degrees. So psych and crim, definitely it's very similar, if not the same. And then I'm sure other degrees as well that we're not even going to talk about. And then money, which is important. Kind of the big thing is, as I said before, PhD program students generally don't necessarily have to pay as much as master's students, and there's reasons for that, but they're also there longer, and it depends on things, so we'll talk about that. And then the timetable, most importantly when applications are due, which I guess I'll just kind of point out now, that if you're going to apply to PhD programs, your applications might be due as soon as December 1st of the fall before you would start. So let's say you want to start a year from this fall, you would need to be applying as early as this December 1st for PhD programs. Master's programs, if you want to start again a year from this fall, you would likely be applying anywhere from like February, March, April of next year. So master's program applications are usually in the spring before, and PhD is in the fall before. So it's more time that the schools need to review applications and things like that. What else did I want to say? That's all I can think of at the moment. So that's kind of a big thing to keep in mind. So you need to plan ahead more with either, you need to plan ahead on the things that you need, but to keep that in mind. Do you want to go right in after you graduate? Do you want to take time off? If you want to apply to PhD programs, you want to go straight in, you need to be ready to apply December 1st, December 15th, maybe in January, but it's usually around that time.
I would just say, going along with that timeline, GRE, taking that as well. You have to study for that and take that before the application process. You have to build that into the timeline as well.
Right. And so do you want to build time to take it again? So oftentimes if people are potentially applying in December 1st, you have to look at how long the scores take to post, like to be graded and done. So 2 of the scores would be available immediately, if I'm correct, and then the writing score takes a little bit long because they have to read it and grade it and that kind of thing. So if that takes a month and your scores and everything's due December 1st, then you likely need to take it by October 31st, and that's without giving you a cushion to take it again. And so if it takes a month before that, then you need to take it in September. But I think a good rule of thumb is to study and to take it over summer potentially, and then you give yourself time to look at retaking it if needed. Though I will say the caveat with everything that's going on right now, you might not have to take the GRE depending if you're applying this school year. So that might be a plus. I know for us, for masters, we could not mandate that students have the GRE when they were applying, because with the lockdown and everything, they weren't able to. So some of the students that applied had the GRE, others didn't, but we didn't hold that against them because of everything that happened. Even though when we were talking about it, we were like, well, the good students that were planning ahead should have taken it, and that maybe is telling, but we still are letting the ones that didn't take it in. With the application cycles coming around, it's going to be important to look at websites and see, are they still mandating the GRE? Can you take the GRE in lockdown? I don't know how that works, but I'm guessing that that's going to be potentially something that is going to change for you guys given what's going on right now. But if I use this video in the future and we're not in lockdown, then you need to plan for the GRE. So maybe you have a good stuff going on. Yes.
I have a question for the Jerry. How many times are you able to take the test?
Question. I feel like it's as many times as you want, but you have to look into if all scores are shown. I feel like maybe the schools can see that, but I would look into that. I don't know if you remember, Sam.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I would read into that. I know that oftentimes schools, I think, will take top scores. So like there's 3 different parts of the GRE. Let's say you do real good with, math, but the writing is the area that, who knows. And so maybe you keep your high math score, but then replace your higher writing score, but they might still see the other scores. So these are things to think about. But every time you take the GRE, it's money as well.
Okay.
So that's something to think about. But yeah,
I would say it does cost to reschedule it too, if you ever need to reschedule your GRE. So just keep that in mind. I had to reschedule mine, and it was a bit of money to reschedule.
Okay.
Did you reschedule it?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
I just remember I did.
Like, was it a conference? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay, so usually we're in a room and I can see like how many people are interested and blah, blah. Maybe there's a little raise your hand button. Maybe do the little raise your hand button that I think is maybe in a corner. I did it myself one time, but raise your little hand on your little reactions if you're interested in a master's degree. Okay, we got some thumbs up. There we go. Got a few, we got claps and thumbs up. I like it. Okay, we're figuring it out. Good. Okay, good. What about PhD? Though they're gonna maybe flow away. Do your thumbs up if we're interested in a PhD program now. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of masters, maybe some PhD. So that'll be helpful. I'll still talk about everything, of course, but I'll make sure that we cover all of that very much in detail. Okay, so there's 2 different types of programs overall, as I've kind of already stated, but I'm just going to reiterate now. So there's just a master's only program, and that would be like what we have at Fresno. Master's only, either in Crim Master's only, or the psych department has an experimental psych program that's master's only, and that's it. That's all you can get from us. Or there's a master's and doctorate program. That's like what Sam is in right now, that you stay in one place and you earn your master's and you stay there, and you also earn your doctorate. So there's 2 types of programs. It's possible that you get your master's. Actually, let me go to this one. So let me take a step back. These are the possible paths that you could take aside from just stopping at undergraduate, which is also completely fine. Totally fine. If you can do what you want to accomplish and not go to graduate school, then there's not a need to go to graduate school, and that is completely fine. But you could go undergraduate and then into a master's program, like you are at Fresno State, and then you decide to stay, which we do have a lot of students that stay, and they are in our master's program, and then they're done because that's all they need for what they want to do with their career, and that's it, and that's wonderful. Also, there's undergrad. You could go to a master's program, and then afterwards, maybe you decide that actually I want to go on and get my doctorate, and I feel ready now. And so you could then go to a doctoral program. My program, and also Sam's, I'm sure, they admit both master's students and undergrad students at the same time. So when they do that, they understand that the master's students aren't going to go there and complete their master's degree like Sam did because they already have it. So they still have to take some coursework, and they might need to do a few other things, but then they just start working on their dissertation and they don't have to do their master's degree. So it's fine if you decide that, you know, you go to a master's degree and then you keep an open mind, and then maybe later you want to go to get a doctorate, maybe you don't, and that's totally fine. So you could start out this way and then end out on this path, which is fine. Usually if we're in this talk, Dr. Pickering would say that this is her path. Maybe she started here, but I think she did a psych master's and then she decided to go get a PhD in criminology. So she went to a master's only program and then decided that she wanted to go on and get a PhD. And then what Sam and I have done is we went from undergrad straight to a doctoral program. And when we're in the doctoral program, we are forced to earn our master's degree before we can finish the program successfully. So we still earn a master's and a PhD. So both of these two at the bottom here earn both master's and PhDs. One has 2 schools, the other has 1, and there's different reasons that you might do this. One is that, like I said before, you just aren't really sure what you that you want to go to a doctoral program, and it's not even in your brain, but once you get to graduate school you realize you really like it, and maybe you want to be a professor, or you need a PhD to do the type of work that you want to do, and so you go on. Or it's possible that you just don't have good enough grades as an undergraduate to get into a PhD program from undergrad. And that happens. Maybe you started off like, you know, some students start off, like Sam started off as animal sciences, and her grades were fine, thankfully, but some start off really hard and they don't do well in like biology, and so they can't raise their GPA, or maybe you just weren't doing so well the first year or two and your GPA can't get that high. And so you start off in a master's degree, and then when you apply to a doctoral program, they're only looking at your graduate transcript seriously. They're not going to hold you back because of your undergrad transcript. They're going to look at your grad transcript and see how good your grades are from graduate school. So that could be a good way to wipe your slate clean and be able to start fresh. But again, maybe you just don't know. All of these are possibilities. And again, making very clear that any of these are fine. It's all about what you want to do in your future. I think the first time maybe I did it with Dr. Arndorfer, maybe, I don't know, because both of us were PhD, obviously, since we have full-time jobs, that it came off to the audience like we were saying that is the way to go and everybody needs to get a PhD. Absolutely not. So I want to make that clear. That's just the route that I took, and I have to have a PhD to have this job. But if you don't need a PhD for your job, don't do it. It's a lot of work, as Sam can tell you about. She's smiling, but holding back tears of pain. No, I'm just kidding. But not kidding. We can talk about that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Master's degree usually are 2-year programs, but sometimes in like the UK, for example, there'll be a year, really intense year. But in the US, they're usually 2 years, though I have seen students in our programs get through in maybe a year and a half, so it's possible. And usually the admission standards are lower. So what are we talking about here? For our master's program, you have to have a 3.0 or higher. For PhD programs, they're usually looking around a 3.5. But I'll tell you, if you don't have a 3.0, that's not something that we can overcome. Like sometimes the schools have admission standards. And so if you don't have a high enough GPA, I highly suggest that you don't graduate if you really want to go to graduate school. I don't know what to do after you graduate. You have to maybe start a whole nother undergrad degree. I really don't know what you can do. So if you stay and work on getting your GPA up, then you have the possibility of entering into a master's program with the 3.0 or above. Also, we have people going into master's programs with like 3.9s and 4.0s and that kind of stuff. So 3.0 to 4.0 is what we're looking for there. As I said before, you can transfer to a PhD later if you want to. If not, you don't need to. And we'll talk about basically what the losing credits means is that if you do a master's degree first and then go to a PhD program, you might have a year more total than someone that only does a PhD program. So it takes a little bit more time in terms of like, I took 6 years, and I believe Dr. Pickering between her master's and PhD program took 7. So you might add 1 extra year, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. So don't let that timing hold you back. You do what is best for you. Why a master's degree? Just in general, there are a lot of things that you work on in a master's degree that you don't necessarily get as an undergrad, especially with such a big program like we have and generally larger classes. Definitely stronger research skills. You're always writing research papers. Hopefully you're exposed to research and research methods at Fresno State, but I know Sam was not. She wrote like a 1-page paper with her professor who will remain nameless, but is no longer teaching methods, thankfully, for our department. So you don't really get that great of writing or research skills as an undergrad. You just don't, unless you're doing things like maybe volunteering in a lab. Like I know several of my undergrad research assistants are in here right now. Even then, we're not working on your writing and things like that. We're working on different skills. You have better opportunities for employment. You might meet people, connections. Sometimes employers reach out to schools to like give them the first notification that a job's going to come on the market. Do you have anyone that you would recommend? Let them know to apply, that kind of stuff. There's lots of different fields that you could be able to join with a master's degree in that area. As I said before, you may only need a master's degree for that career. And so why would you do a PhD with all that extra time and money if you don't need it? And you might not know if you even want to do a PhD. What is that? It sounds scary. Why would I commit all that time to it? Sounds too hard. Let's just do that next step, and that's totally fine. Let's see. This is maybe, okay. I think this is perhaps from the FBS one in particular, and basically talking about if you are interested in more like FBS or counseling and that kind of stuff, you need to be very good at the research you do beforehand to see if you need to have a master's or you need to have a PhD or a PsyD to do things like counseling or have a private practice and things like that. So you need to know if a master's would limit what you're able to do as a forensic psychologist in this instance. So looking at many states, if you only have a master's degree, you cannot have your own private practice. So that means you can't have your own private business and therapy. You have to maybe be part of a practice or a clinic. Maybe that's fine, or maybe you want to leave that avenue open, and so you need to get more than just that master's degree. But these are things you need to think about with your future career. I know I want to do this or something like this. Does it look like I need to get more than a master's? These are things you have to think about. Okay, what is a PhD? A PhD means Doctor of Philosophy, which is kind of funny because the PsyD is the doctorate in psychology. But a PhD is in all different disciplines: criminology, psychology, math, philosophy, just everything. Even medicine could have a doctorate of philosophy and a medical degree. There's lots of different areas. As I said before, if you come straight from undergrad, you complete your master's and your PhD at the same time. If you've already come in with your master's, then you don't necessarily need to do it again. Though I will tell you a caveat: in my own program, a man came in from a master's program, but he did not do a thesis. He did something else, like maybe a project, and didn't do a master's thesis research project. And so when he came to my program, he had to do that project. So it took him a little bit longer. So I guess the point of that, saying that, is if you think maybe once you're there, and hopefully once you get into a graduate program, that your people that are advising you will tell you this, but if you get into a graduate program and you think you might want to go to a PhD program, you need to do the thesis. So at our graduate program, you can either do the thesis or you can take the comprehensive exams, which is a 1.5-day test on various different things. A lot of students do the comprehensive exam because it's quicker and a little bit easier, which either are, kind of difficult. But if you do the comprehensive exam, then if you go to a doctoral program, you very likely have to do your thesis there. And so it's just kind of a thing. If you think you want to go on to a doctoral program, write a little note to yourself: strongly consider doing a thesis. But that's not necessarily what you have to worry about right now. Most of the time it's 6 years, if not longer. I think 6 is pretty normal. Sam, would you say that for what you've seen at your program?
Yeah, I would say 6 is pretty normal, average. Yeah. Sometimes longer.
Yeah, sometimes longer, especially now.
Sometimes shorter.
Yeah. Sometimes shorter, yeah. I know I've had someone I know went through in 4 years, but they're not necessarily very attractive to jobs because they don't have the things that they're looking for, like publications or teaching experience or that kind of stuff. So there's different reasons to stay longer. Sometimes research takes longer. Let's see. As I said before, with a master's program, it's more on the coursework, and that you're doing usually 3 courses at a time for a master's program. Even though I'm on the doctoral slide, I forgot to mention this. You're usually doing 3 courses at a time, and it's all about the coursework from one semester to the other. Research is not really, like, in terms of like conducting your own research, that's not necessarily what the point of it is. You're writing research proposals, you're learning about research, you're learning how to do, like, finding research articles on the internet, maybe how to do data analyses, but you're not doing research in the same way as what you do at a doctoral program. At a doctoral program, when I first started, I was given my own research study. I had to get a bunch of research assistants, and I had to start running human subjects through, like, an interviewing type scenario. That's not necessarily what's happening at a master's program. You're doing your coursework, and then if you choose to do a thesis, sometimes programs require you to do a thesis. Ours, it's a choice. If you choose to do that, then you get to do your own research project. So things to think about across the 2 programs. But with a PhD, it's all about research. Not only classes, like classes are important, but my professor always said, of course, you need to do the classes and to do well in them, but your main focus needs to be the research and learning how to do that, and to get things, published, and those types of things are more important in a doctoral program versus a master's program. And these are going to be in graduate programs and universities. So it's not going to be like an Alliant kind of situation. It's usually going to be at a CSU, not CSU, a UC, like UC Irvine, for example, has both very good criminology programs and psych and law programs. So those would be examples of PhD programs. Actually, UCs also have master's programs only. So I've just thought of this, that I know that UC Irvine has an online master's program. So sometimes they have both, but they're allowed to have both, but the CSUs are only allowed to have master's programs. And we talked about the types of jobs. I don't know if I talk about this elsewhere. One thing with considering a clinical versus non-clinical for the psych type jobs, so like a forensic psychologist, you need to have, you need to really think about the type of program that you want, because the degree is going to make a difference. I did not go to a place where I would come out with the ability to counsel people or to diagnose mental illnesses or to get licensed to practice in the state of California or anywhere, because that's not what my degree was for. So I knew going into it that I didn't want to do those things, as I told you with that story before. So I knew I didn't want to go to a clinical school. So I need to know that before I apply. With crim versus like a legal psych program, it's a little bit easier to go in between either and still have the same career opportunities open to you. But with clinical psychology, like I said, if you want to be treating and diagnosing mental illnesses in prisons and jails, treating officers that have used their weapon, you know, that kind of thing, you need to go to clinical programs. And when you need to decide that, when you're applying to graduate school. So that's when you need to make those decisions. You can't change your mind once you're in grad school. Otherwise, you have to go to a different program. So that those decisions can be very important, which is kind of what this bottom is. And that's more for psych, because there's a lot of areas of psychology, legal and forensic being one of them. Crim isn't quite that way, where you're cutting yourself off from other opportunities. So if you're interested in clinical, perhaps you want to talk to me more about it, please do. I can tell you more about it or put you in contact with some of my students from FIU that went to clinical programs and have actually graduated recently. So I've already reached out to them about being able to talk to people. So if you want that, please let me know. PsyD is the last degree that we're going to talk about, and it's called a Doctor of Psychology, which is kind of misleading because you would think that any psychologist would need this, but it has a different purpose. Generally, PsyD programs are ones that focus very much on like treating people and not on research. So if you know that you don't really care that much about research and it's more about training on things like diagnosis and treatment of persons, and that's what you want to do, and you never want to do the research part of it. You have to do a little bit when you're there, but it's not the same kind of focus. Also, if in terms of being able to teach later as like a professor like I am, generally you need to have a PhD and not a PsyD. So that's something else to keep in mind if you want to leave that door open. A PsyD is probably not going to be the best avenue for you, and a clinical would leave you able to be a professor, like Dr. Zizian has a clinical degree, so he can teach, he does research, he is treating and diagnosing people with mental illnesses. He can do all those things because he has the correct degree to do all of those things. Some schools allow PsyD, but a lot of schools like ours, when we're looking to hire people, we're not going to accept people with PsyDs. So it's just something to keep in mind, that you could be limiting a career opportunity if you're potentially interested in being a professor. PsyD programs often might be in like standalone schools, like an Alliant kind of situation versus UC. But they could potentially be in larger schools, so it just depends, but they're more likely to not be in the larger school. They are easier to gain admissions than a clinical program. Clinical is probably the most competitive type of program to get into that I've seen in our area, and they're usually more expensive too. So that's something to keep in mind. So people with PsyDs are usually working in clinics or private practice. They're not doing the research. They're not working at schools like this. And I said before, may not be qualified to be a professor. Some schools might be okay with it, others are not. So to be aware that that could be limiting you. So kind of the big wrap up here for our degrees. Master's is usually 2 years. I don't see it going longer than that unless your research takes longer and you need to do that, or you have some kind of medical issue or any other life issue that makes it so that you can't be full-time, basically. I shouldn't even say a medical issue, because we have police officers in our program that are going part-time, and so they're going to take longer than 2 years. So scratch that. But if you're full-time, 2 years is usually what it takes people, and we don't see too much more than that. Like I said before, it could be even 1.5 years if you take more than 3 classes a semester, but that'll be, you know, a lot of work to do. And some schools require that you do a thesis and your comprehensive exams, or like ours at Fresno State, you do one or the other. PhD, usually about 6 years. You have the same coursework, usually maybe a little bit longer coursework versus a master's program. You have to do research, you have to do a thesis and a dissertation. You may also have examinations. I did. Sam doesn't, so that's nice for her. We hate her for that. Just kidding. And then if you are in a clinical degree, you might be like done with school, but then you have to do a year internship after that as part of earning your degree. So with clinical, there's a little bit more to it, and it would make sense that we don't just want you to have that in the classroom experience, but we want to have some supervised experience working with people in the field before we say you're ready to go have a, you know, big person job. Okay. Questions before we go on to what the applications look like? One thing that I wanted to say, maybe I'll just have Sam talk about it because I've been talking a lot, but how about describe the differences of your undergraduate classes, that they also, you know, you guys were in the same types of undergraduate classes versus graduate school classes. How are they different?
I'd say one of the biggest differences is really discussion-based classes are much more common in graduate school. Most of the class, you do your reading on your own time, you come into class, and it's less of a lecture-based environment and more where you're expected as a graduate student to contribute to the class and be discussing the topics throughout the semester. It's a lot less lecture. I know personally, it took me a while to get used to speaking in class a lot. I didn't talk a lot in classes in undergrad, but I had to get used to that in graduate school, and that was kind of a growing pain my first semester in graduate school. But you're kind of forced into it. It's part of the way the classes go. There's a lot more writing, a lot more papers. Usually there's not, at least in my program, we don't have a lot of exams. I think the only course that I had any exams in was research methods and statistics. Otherwise, usually I have a midterm paper and a final paper. It's a lot of writing, a lot of discussion based. You generally take fewer classes, but it still feels like more work. I think I took about 5 classes on average while I was at Fresno State, and you take about 3 as a graduate student, at least in my program, but it still feels like a lot more work just because you're expected to do a lot more reading on your own time, a lot more writing and things like that. It's generally the biggest differences that I've noticed.
What about class size?
Oh yeah, class size. Usually my classes have averaged about 10 people. My smallest class, there were 2 of us in it, and I think the largest class was about 20, but generally it's about 10 people.
Right. So it's very obvious if you come and you're unprepared. As a professor, and I'm sure even as a student, it's very obvious when people are not participating. And I've taught one graduate class, and then I decided to take a break from that. But it's like very obvious when they're, you know, on their computer and not paying attention, things like that. So you have to be reading and you have to be participating. What are you reading? You're reading research articles. Usually it's not necessarily you're buying textbooks, though in a statistics class or methods class, you very likely will be having a textbook. But otherwise, it's usually, you know, free readings like articles and things like that. But it's a lot of reading because you might have to read like 5 or more articles a week that you're expected to understand and talk about.
And
And
that
if
could
you're
just
not,
be for one class.
and that, yeah, just one, so times 3, and keeping everything straight, and the papers, and your grade is just based on participation maybe and these 2 papers, so a lot's at stake. So very different. A master's thesis is a question. Since Sam did that recently, what is a master's thesis?
A research project that you conduct generally with a faculty advisor. You have a master's chair who's a faculty advisor. It's a research project that you conduct. How much do you want me to get into data versus new project?
Basically, it's a new project that no one's ever done before. It's a very large research paper. It's I don't know how many pages yours was. Like
45, 50?
45, 50, yeah. So it's a lengthy paper, and you have to conduct new research that's never been done before. So you have to do a lot of research on the front end called a literature review. You come up with a new research like idea and topic, you carry it out, you collect data, you analyze the data, you discuss the data, and then you often present it to your committee, which is several professors who then say whether you pass that part of your program. So you have to successfully pass your master's thesis in order to get your master's degree. So for Sam and myself, we had to do those things to be able to move on in the program. And then for Fresno State students, if you decide to do the master's track, because there's 2 different tracks, if you decide that master's track, you have to successfully do it to graduate. So if you do all the coursework and then you don't do the thesis after you've signed a paper saying I'm doing the thesis track, you won't get to graduate. That's not often that happens, but if you decide not to do it or you just drag your feet and you don't want to write, then you don't get to graduate. But that's like the worst case scenario. Most people do. And you work with one professor in particular. So I had my first master's student last year, and we worked for over a year together on the project. And she wrote the paper, I would give edits and things like that. And then finally, when it was at a good stage, we give it to the other 2 committee members. For her, it was Dr. Arndorfer and Dr. English, who looked it over, gave comments, said what they wanted to pass the paper, went back and forth with them, and then finally they said it was okay, and she got to graduate. So that's kind of what that is. And then the PhD is very similar. It's just a bigger project, a bigger paper, and it's hard to quantify. But if you want examples, we can give you examples. So email me and I can give you mine. We can find Sam's, all that kind of stuff is possible. And they're also, you can just find them online. Actually, I get emails from my graduate school every month saying how many people have downloaded my master's thesis and my doctoral dissertation. And I'm like, why are these people downloading my work from like China, Australia? Like, how are you finding this? And why are you reading it? I have like over 2,000 reads. Like, it's weird. I don't know. It's weird to me. Any other questions before we move on? Yeah, I think I just wanted to cover what the classes are like. I think I have a question here.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I guess my question is more like worst case scenario, like how does like the COVID-19 like lockdown affect all the master programs or doctorate programs?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think for ours, it's up to the professors what they want to do. If I were running a master's class, I would do it like I've been doing my undergraduates. But I mean, I would have it basically a synchronous live Zoom like this, because I think it's very difficult to do an online discussion-based class to have the same feeling. Even though I went to a whole summer training about it, I still don't think it's the same. But the professor gets to decide, do I just want to have everything online and you have to like do some discussion posts and write a paper and like go through the class, or are you going to be meeting every week? It's up to the professor. As far as I know, that's generally what all of this COVID stuff has been doing. It's up to the professor what they're doing. Sam, you can tell her what your school's doing.
Yeah, so in the spring, one of my classes went online, and we did the same thing where it was a video lecture and we had in-class discussions, and it worked fairly well. I think especially because grad classes are smaller generally too, it's a little easier to have those discussions when you don't have 50 people in your class. But my school in the fall, we're actually going back because they've made that decision that we're going to have some in-person classes, and because grad classes are smaller, they're having us go back in person. But it just depends on the class itself and the individual instructors in the different schools.
I think the other thing that is potentially problematic is doing the research part, but I feel like for people that haven't applied yet, hopefully it won't be an issue. But if I was doing my dissertation data collection right now, I would be put a year behind, if not more, because I need students to be my participants. And for my dissertation, I mean, even for my master's, I had over 100 sessions. I think for my dissertation, over 200, and that takes time to collect. And if there aren't in-person classes, I don't know how I would do my research. So maybe it's just adjusting to what you want to do your research for, if it's waiting. But I don't, like I said, I don't think it'll be an issue for people like you guys that haven't applied yet, because even for your first year, if you go into a program not this year, but next year, when you would be able to even go in after graduating, even if that year isn't, if it's still online, the year after, I would hope it would be fine. And by that point, you could do hopefully anything. I don't know. I don't think it'll affect you, but it's possible that this is our new normal and I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully we'll figure stuff out.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Would I need a master's or a doctoral to pursue a career as a defensive lawyer?
You need to go to law school.
Okay.
Law school is a separate separate everything. So it's like a graduate school, but it's only for people who want to become attorneys.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't really know that much about applying to law schools, but I would just start Googling if it was me and start there. And then I know we have various professors that are attorneys, maybe reaching out to them about the process, but I don't know too much about that other than you don't want to go this route because this doesn't get you to be an attorney. You need to go to law school and then take the bar exam for whatever state and stuff like that.
Can you point me to the direction of a instructor that I might be able to talk to more about this?
The only one I can think of for sure is the last name is Irwin. I don't know if he's online. If you email me later and say that you were the one that was asking about law school, that I can look up his email address and introduce you both over email.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I know I don't know much about law school. Other than what Elwood's taught me. Another question we get is, are you assigned to one professor throughout grad school? It depends. So with a master's program, no. You're just supposed to go through classes, and then if you want to do a thesis, it's up to you to reach out to people that might have similar interests in the stuff you want to study. So the one student that I did her master's degree with her, the project anyways, I knew her from undergrad and we worked on, she was my research assistant. So we already had that relationship. And so she came and found me. But for a PhD program, you apply to work. You apply to work with one person, and so you're not necessarily assigned to them, but you work with them, and you're in their lab, and that's the whole reason you went there. So I guess kind of technically you're assigned to them, but that's why you decided to go there. And then I think for John, Michael Yonker, Yonker, is another professor that at least did practice law, unless he still does. So Sabrina, let us know about that one. I know there's others, I just can't think of them, but I could also reach out to the chair of the department and ask, and she would know. But okay, so applications. Admissions might be kind of similar for a law school, but don't quote me on that. These I know is true for Crim and Psych, so we'll go with that. One thing to keep in mind before we get to this point is that all schools have the right to have varying application requirements. What we're going to show you is things that are generally desired across all applications, but you always, always, always have to look at the school and what they require. And so I'll have Sam tell you about how she kept everything straight, but it's very important to understand this school wants this and this school wants this. That's kind of the same as the other one, but it's a little bit different. So I need to make sure that I have this for this one, that for that one, etc. But there are common elements, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here. So common elements, but again, not all program applications are the same, so you need to pay attention to that. Statement of interest or your personal statement is something that's often required across all of them, though they might vary in the length that they want or the question. LORs are letters of recommendation, and we'll talk about that. Research experience, I think, is more important if you want to go to a PhD program, but still is helpful to get letters of recommendation. So even for my research assistants that are here, that are only interested in master's programs because that's what they would need to do their career, then it's still going to be helpful to get a really good letter of recommendation, that research experience. GRE we talked about, GPA we also talked about, but it's also in here. Some or all schools might do some kind of interview, whether it's over the phone, Zoom, or in person, though probably not this year in person. Writing samples they may want, especially PhD programs. Work experience, I put that there, but I don't really know that that's the case or any of these things. And then I put prior contact with faculty at the institution, and I mean this in particular with PhD programs because that could potentially be a positive when they're looking at applications and one professor's like, oh yeah, that one person reached out to me, they seem really interested. We had this conversation, that kind of thing. It's not a requirement, but it could be a benefit depending on how you do it. So as we talked about with PhD programs, you're working with a particular person, and it could be important, or I would argue it is important, to figure out, potentially reach out to that person that you're interested in and see if they're going to be accepting students the year that you're applying. So let's say Sam wanted to work with Dr. Redlick, and Dr. Redlick is going to be on sabbatical for a year, or she's going to, she already has too many people working with her. Then maybe Sam wouldn't have applied to that program at all because she couldn't work with Dr. Redlick, and so she would apply somewhere else. Sometimes they have this stuff posted on their application page or a frequently asked question page so that they don't get all the emails, but if you don't see it, it might be a good idea to email the people you're interested in, maybe closer to when you apply, to ask them, are you accepting students the next year? Because if they're not, and that's the only person you're interested in, then you're not going to apply to that school. So that's something that is perhaps important. But with master's programs, again, that's not an issue. So if you're doing master's programs, you don't need to be emailing different professors asking to work with them, because that's not how master's programs work. Sam, did you reach out to people before? I don't remember.
I did. I made sure to email all of the people I was interested in working with before submitting applications.
Yeah.
And I even, after I emailed with Dr. Red, like I think we had a phone conversation as well.
Yeah. So when you do that, you want to be extremely respectful, have good email etiquette. Sam's teaching a class right now over summer research methods, and she got an email from one of her students the other day that, what was it?
It only had a subject line, no name, no body of the email.
Yeah. So don't do that.
It was great.
It's not a good way to introduce yourself. So you're making a first impression via email. Always be very polite, do proper email etiquette. If you're not sure, maybe get a professor to look over your email beforehand. That kind of thing doesn't hurt. Okay, this is just a slide for psych in particular. So there's so many different types of psych programs or just programs in general. Yeah, most of these are psych. So legal psych, experimental psych, forensic psych, and then all these others that aren't really related specifically to psychology, but sociology, criminal justice. There's just lots of different areas. So you need to know what could potentially work for you and what isn't going to be a good fit for you. You might apply to multiple different types of programs. So Sam applied to criminology programs and legal psych programs. I applied to legal psych and maybe, I don't know, I feel like some other kind of psych, maybe social psych. I didn't apply to any criminology programs. I don't know why. Maybe because my parents are psychologists, but anyways, things to think about. There are different places to find people that are things that you're interested in. We already talked about this, talk about it one more time and then pass it by. GPA. Master's programs, 3.0 and above. 2.99 might not be enough. So if you're not there yet, take more classes, do well in them, get your GPA up before you graduate. There's nothing else that you can do or we can do. So don't graduate, get your GPA up. And then it's usually a 3.5 or higher for competitive PhD programs, but it might be lower than that. I think Dr. Pickering said she was looking around recently and it wasn't spelled out that specifically. So it's possible you could still be applying and admitted to PhD programs. So that's like an uncertainty, but generally those have been the guidelines. Let's see what else we got. Letters of recommendation. This is something that's usually a brand new area for people and haven't really thought of this or heard about this before. I abbreviate it LOR. And you usually need 3 letters. So what does this mean? You need to start thinking about who might be your letters of recommendation. These people, you hope, know you okay and well enough and can write you a positive letter of recommendation. Trying to think, I had my supervisor from my FBI internship, and then somebody I did research for, and then somebody I did an independent study with. So 2 professors and an internship supervisor. Usually you have 2 that are professors, and 1 can be job related or internship related, but I wouldn't necessarily do like my TJ Maxx supervisor unless you have absolutely nothing else. You want it to be related and speak well to what you're going to school for. No parents or family members aren't going to be good either. You need to have people that can speak about you objectively and not, think that your mom's just saying nice things about you. Sam, do you remember who you had? I know I was one, but.
I had you, Dr. Scrapic, and Marie at the McNair.
Okay. So she was a McNair student, and she did the COS honors program as well. For those of you that I know, at least one is in COS next year, and then a few of you applied to McNair. So there's different ways to get letters. And she did research with me, and she did research with Scrapic too. So just things to think about. And these are things that also you might not be aware of, but you don't get to read unless the professor gives it to you. So you have no idea what they're saying about you, and that's the norm, because we need to be able to be truthful, because it's not just about you, but it's our reputations on the line. So if I lie to Dr. Redlick about Sam, maybe I tricked her about Sam, but then she'll never take any of my students ever again. And so I don't want that. I don't want to be spreading bad things about me around the academic community, because I see her multiple times a year, Dr. Redlick. I respect her. And so anyways, we tell the truth, right? And so hopefully we can say nice things about you. I will also say that I had somebody reach out to me that was an RA of mine that did like maybe a month's worth of work. He also took a class with me and maybe got a C, and he asked me to write a letter about being a substitute teacher, something which I've never heard of having to do before. I was open to it, but I said, I don't think I'm going to be the best letter for you. I don't really know what's involved, but also you know, kind of ghosted, which if you were in my lab, I made everybody promise to not ghost. But you just kind of vanished. You didn't do a lot of work and you didn't do well in my class. So I don't think my letter's going to be all that good for you. I mean, if you want me to write it, I can, but I don't think it's going to be helpful to you. So I will be honest to people. And if I'll say, like, I don't think my letter will be all that great for you, then I'm trying to be helpful, because it's not going to be a positive letter that I'm going to be writing. Some people won't necessarily tell the students that, but hopefully you as a student can think about, will they have positive things to say about me? I don't know that he really thought it through, but you have to think about that. So also something, I don't know if I have it. It might be later on, but something you need to ask, not only if they'd be willing to write you a letter of recommendation, but if they'd be willing to write you a strong letter of recommendation or a positive letter of recommendation. So making that distinction is showing that you care that it is, you know, a good one, hopefully, and can speak to many positive attributes about you, and that wouldn't necessarily be negative. But sometimes I have to write mixed letters, and I'm truthful. What can I say? I have to be. Most of the time it's not a problem, hopefully, but sometimes I do have to include things that aren't necessarily in the best light. Sometimes they can compensate for some lower areas, just saying like how amazing of a student you are and all the positive interactions I've had with you. And maybe that can help put you over the edge and be admitted into the program. But how can we write these letters? So I never really thought about it until I had to do it myself. But if you put yourself in the professor's shoes, what are they going to be able to say about you? If I've just had you in one class and you got an A, but I don't know you, I've never really talked to you. Obviously, I've graded your things, but if you think about it, we have 40 times 4 students every semester. I can't really say a whole lot, and that's not all that meaningful other than reading your transcripts. So how do I get to know you? I have you in multiple classes. You talk to me. We, you know, when we had office hours, go into my office, or we'll do Zoom office hours. You just spend more time with the person to get to know you. You do research with me. I help you on a project. I don't know, but we have more time together. And I can write you a better letter beyond just, yeah, I had her this semester, she got this grade. That's it. It's not that great. So you have to help us be able to say more great things about you by getting to know you better. So I said, ask for a positive letter, not just a letter. Hopefully any professor would say no if they don't think they can do a positive one, but I can't guarantee that. I can't guarantee what all professors will do, unfortunately. You also need to give us a lot of time, and I'll have Sam talk about how she kind of organized all of this and dealt with it, but you've got to give us time. If you think about how many students might be asking for letters, and also something to keep in mind, if you ask for a letter and you apply to 10 schools, that means I am writing letters, the same letter, but I'm tweaking it slightly for all 10 schools. So you don't have to ask, if you apply to 10 schools times 3 letters, 30 different people to write you letters. No, Sam said she applied to 10 schools. I wrote letters for her 10 schools. I changed the titles and they were either for crim or for psych. So I had slightly different letters for her applying to crim versus her applying to psych programs. And I know that's my job, but I'm agreeing to do that for however many schools you apply to, but you need to let me know approximately how many schools I'm applying to. This is about when they're due. I'm going to provide you more information and give me at least a month, if not more, because I might have 5-10 students I'm writing letters for and they're all due around the same time. So the more time you give me, the happier I'll be. And that's probably a good thing for you in terms of me writing letters. Okay, Sam, take it away.
Yeah, so when I was applying to school, I had multiple Excel sheets just to kind of keep track of everything with due dates, everything that was required for the schools. And then for the letters of recommendation, I definitely tried to give my letter writers enough notice. And then I also tried to include things that could be helpful for them in sort of a little packet that I put together. Just a personal statement, I believe, was in there. The schools I was applying to, I think I had other things in there as well, but I'm not remembering as well at the moment. Do you remember what else I had? No, I remember.
Oh, usually professors might ask for a CV, which is an academic resume, and your personal statement and the schools you're applying to, and maybe more, but usually those are the common things. So we can kind of get a picture of what you're applying to and then incorporate that into our letter. And then you can speak about reminders, especially for me.
Just sending very nice reminders to your letter writers around the times each application is due. Giving them enough notice before, but just a little reminder before things are due.
And you can even ask them if they'd like those beforehand. Maybe some people like Arndorfer and Pickering are more on top of things, but me, I know I need reminders. And so if you ask me, I'll be like, yes, send a week before, send a day before, just check in with me until I tell you it's sent, you know, like that's what I need, where that's helpful to me and I get things done. But, you know, you can just ask those things and it's not a big deal beforehand. Like, would you like me to send you reminders? That kind of stuff.
I will say I had one letter writer who was not Dr. K, who did not send one of the letters to the schools. And so I had to make sure I sent the reminder about that when I found out the deadline was passed too. So it is important to keep track of those things and make sure to ask if they need reminders and to send reminders and be on top of things.
Yeah. So yeah, she sent me, like, it's not uncommon to send like an Excel, like Google Sheets document where like she could send that one document to all of her letter writers that has all the schools, the program, who she might be working with or applying to work with, the deadline, how the letter is supposed to be submitted. Usually now it's like they send an email link to me, so she doesn't have access to it, and then I click on the link. But is it possible that it's still mail, or do I have to email it to someone? Like that stuff is there. Due dates, all that stuff is in there. So I could just go to that document. Even if she makes updates, she'll say like, I added a school, which is fine. Like you found another school you want to apply to. It's on the sheet, you know, that kind of stuff. Everything is there that we can just go to. If we have paper stuff, which I know some people gave me last time around, I was like, where is that folder? I don't know. It's an email, at least I can search for it if it's like hard copy. But you can also ask people what they would want. Do you want hard copy stuff? Do you want emails? Like just that, be aware of what they might want is helpful. Okay, so she went over creating some kind of a table for not only for, she talked about for applying for herself that she made, but also just for her letter writers. So you make multiple of these tables to keep yourself organized. As we said, there you might need a copy of your resume and your statement of purpose, which we'll talk about. And then if for some reason, though very unlikely now, things need to be mailed in, then you give me an addressed envelope with a stamp on it. So all I have to do is print my thing, sign it, put it in the mail, and it's done. You're not expecting me to pay for all of that stuff, but because I don't think that's provided by the school, I don't know. But you take care of all that. Okay. Also things that you might want to give them, and I'll often ask if I write letters, remind us what classes you took, especially if people, like I'm seeing Estella's face right now, I'm like, I don't remember all the classes that you've had with me. Like, it's been a lot. Remind me when they were, what the grades were. I think I assume I know what the grades are, but just remind me. Maybe send me your DPR so I can like boast about your great GPA, you know, that kind of stuff. Tell us, like, I don't know if you're a double major or you have a minor, that kind of stuff. If you've presented at conferences or papers, honor societies, like we want a complete picture of you so we can like brag about you in this letter. Like, not only is she doing all these great things, but she does this and this and this. And we want the ability to have all of that information. We don't just talk necessarily about what we know about you from our own personal experience, but other things that you do in addition to the great things that we know about you from our own personal experience. So kind of reminding them about all these things or giving us all this information is only to your benefit. So reminding, again, maybe you want to just ask, like, would you like me to send you all of the classes I've had with you in the grades and the semesters? Like, I will ask for that. I'll also ask, like, what semester did you join my lab and what have you been doing with me? Like, just remind me. I kind of have a general idea, but I don't want to forget stuff. So always just ask people if they want that. It doesn't hurt. It only can help you. Okay. So research with faculty, I'd say, I think I said this before, it's going to be a lot more beneficial for especially psych PhD programs. I don't know. I think when I've said it before with Dr. Pickering, she said it wasn't as big a deal with crim PhD programs, but I think in any case, it would set you up as something distinctive about you, because not that many students participate in research as research assistants. So if you are doing this or you choose to do it, it could be a benefit to you as long as you do it well. So as I said, Sam worked with me and she worked with Dr. Scrappick. I volunteered in 2 labs as an undergraduate as well. But you don't have to. You don't have to. You can get into a master's and a PhD program without it. So these are just things if you want to like create the best you possible to get into these programs with, you know, do everything possible that you can. This is something to do, but if you can't do it, then it's okay. Not everybody has the opportunity to do these things. I know a lot of times I might want someone to be a part of my lab, but they have to work and they don't have time. And, you know, that's just the way it is. And that's totally fine. But like I said before, if we work together on research, then I get to know you more. And oftentimes people, especially in FBS, the professors won't necessarily write you letters unless we've done research for you, or with you. My caveat is that I also do it for the honors program because I am the honors program coordinator. So I am in the unique position to tell people about the honors program, and I always teach at least one class in the honors program for crim. So I'll do that as well. But my students that I don't necessarily have too much contact with otherwise, maybe a class, it goes back to that situation I said before where, what can I really say about you? I've had you for a semester, you got an A. I don't know, maybe I can say you talk in class, though, you know, not a lot of kids necessarily do, and that's not necessarily going to be a great letter for you. But do you have people you can ask? Not necessarily. So if you're planning kind of from now until the future, because I know I have some people either now or that are going to get this video that are freshmen, you can think about ways to help either get into research or line up letters for yourself to take multiple classes with the same professor, get to know that professor, like have conversations with us, ask about, you know, our careers, our life, what they want to do, you know, have those kinds of relationships will make things easier. If anybody wants to learn more about research with faculty, I can talk about it, but I think generally I'll just keep going. GRE, we kind of talked about as well. I'll have Sam talk about it because I took it a while ago and it's changed a little bit since then. So I'm gonna put it on you.
I saw this screen and immediately just hated looking at it because the GREs are just a terrible process that you just have to go through. Just study. There's a lot of GRE prep books. It is a really good idea to plan ahead and give yourself the opportunity to take it more than once if you need to, with the caveat being that it does cost to take it each time. I ended up only taking it once. I did end up postponing, and I took it in October, so I really only had the one opportunity to take it, but it ended up working out. But yeah, definitely make sure that you study for it. It's not something that you can just go into without studying for. And then some schools do require a specialty GRE. I think I had to take the psychology GRE as well for one or two of the programs that I applied to that was a legal psych.
Yeah, I don't think there's a specialty one for crim, so, and very few schools require the specialty one. I think there was one school that if I applied to, I would take it, and it was only one I didn't care about. So I was like, I'm not going to apply to that school because I'm not going to take this one test for one school. But, you know, you make your own decisions. And then, like I said, for you guys, it's very possible you don't even have to take it because you can't go into a testing center necessarily. So who knows?
The other thing, I know, so Mason, I found out after I had been in the program for a couple of years that the committee determines funding a little bit on GRE scores as well. So they might not weigh it as heavily for admission against other things in your application, such as research experience or GPAs and things like that. But sometimes they do make funding decisions based on GRE scores as well.
So it's still going to benefit you to do well on this by maybe getting more money, or so having to pay less for the school or be getting a job at the school. Like Sam is a research assistant. She gets a salary for that, those types of things. So it's beneficial potentially. I know, at least for my program, the people that did really well got like funding for a couple years just to do research, so they didn't have to be a TA or anything like that. So there's things that could be beneficial if you're doing well. I think generally for the studying broadly, there's the vocabulary that you can choose to study for, and then just understanding the exam overall and how it's structured, and then also brushing up on different like math formulas and stuff that you haven't used in a really long time. I forget what it is, but basically it's the SAT or the ACT, but it's for graduate school, so it's a little bit different. And I think eventually schools generally are going to go away from these standardized tests, but I don't know when that'll be or if that'll happen. So still, this may be a requirement for you, and we're including it.
I was, Oh, sorry, I was just going to jump in and say the McNair program at Fresno State too, they also do a GRE prep course that they pay for in the summer as well.
Okay. Not sure what they're doing this summer, but hopefully something.
Yeah, in past summers.
I've got a visitor over here.
She's been there for a while.
She doesn't like Zoom, but she's here, guys. She must like you guys. The scores and stuff don't make sense to me as much anymore because it's not what I took. The scoring was different, but generally there's scores that schools might put, like generally our average students are around this score for these areas. And so you want to shoot for that area. I don't know if programs will put you have to get this score or above. They probably don't want to limit themselves that way, but if you can find on their website generally what the applicants' scores are, that might be helpful to you. We don't put it for master's programs, but just like with getting into PhD programs, scores on for the master's program students, lesser or lower scores will be accepted. I think for the most part, we just don't accept like 1 percentile of writing and stuff like that. We don't have set guidelines for the master's program, but generally lower scores are acceptable in master's programs versus PhD programs. But I would just kind of Google more about it. I got these from a past student who helped me put this section together because I told him that it changed since I took it because we had it out of like 1600 and now it's different, just like the SAT changed. But, you know, look into this stuff. I
I
see
think you
someone
have
put
a
it,
question.
I know it says question, Dr. K. I don't know if they want to verbalize. Yeah.
Yes, can I?
Okay. Yes.
So I'm a little confused now. So for the GRE, that's only if you're trying to get into a PhD program or for the master's as well? I'm confused now.
Okay, so what I understand why you are confused, and I apologize. I said for Fresno State, for our criminology master's program, this last time around, so when we were making decisions in May, we could not include GRE because of COVID. So because of everything that was going on, we could not turn down students that hadn't taken the GRE. But in past years, like the year before, if you didn't take the GRE, you're automatically told no. So what I was saying is across the board, usually outside of this pandemic, master's and PhD programs require the GRE. Right now, I don't know, and you're gonna have to look at each individual school's website to see, are they still requiring the GRE? And if so, how can I take it in the pandemic? But I think this year you might not have to take it, but I can't say for certain. That's just my kind of guess at this point based on how things are going. But just from Fresno State's Crim Master's Programs perspective, we did not require students to take it for admissions decisions that we made in May for starting this fall. The GRE was not required because of COVID, and I'm guessing next year will be the same, but I don't know. Sabrina?
Yeah, so I had a question because I know there's a couple of different avenues that people can pursue, like regarding like graduate programs. Like you can do like the master's and then later decide that you want to do the doctorate. So would your GRE still affect that?
Good question. As far as I know, the GRE scores might be good for 5 years. So if you take your GRE and you like those scores, you can keep them, assuming that you get done with your master's program in the time frame that the GRE is still good. I think it's 5 years, but don't quote me on that. So it's very likely that you could use the same scores, but if you want to try and do better, you could study and take it again, or you could just keep those GRE scores. It's up to you. Okay. So there's different things that I feel like a student gave this to us, maybe from McNair, but there is a possibility for you to get reduced fees on the GRE. So I copied this from a student, I think, so I'll read it. Can be a tedious process to request the reduced fees, but you could fill out a form that is found on the GRE website and submitting a recent FAFSA SAR form with that. This one student that gave me the information got a response 2 weeks later and was granted a voucher code to get 50% off the exam and free pre-exam study tools. I don't know if those tools were already out there or if they were just for her. But in any case, if you think you might qualify and you're up for emailing and filling out these forms, I say do it. If you can get reduced fees, get reduced fees. If you're in the McNair, you get one of those programs, maybe also reduced fees. I don't remember. No.
I'm not sure about the GREs. I do know that they, a lot of schools will waive your application fee if you're a McNair student.
Okay. So there's the website, and I will be posting this later so you can get that. Also, I need to look through my old emails, but I know Dr. Arndorfer found free GRE study things through the library website, so I'll see if I can find those as well. I don't know if they were flashcards or books or something. Maybe if you just search GRE, but there's
I think
some
there's
stuff
free
that's
practice tests online.
Okay. Free practice test too. There's different free stuff out there, but books can be helpful. There might be books that you can buy used or but you definitely need to do some kind of review and studying to do well. Like I said, the math stuff we haven't used in a while, probably vocabulary, potentially learning how the exam is structured and how it works is important, all that stuff. Personal statements. Maybe speak about this since you wrote one recently more than me.
I'm just sitting here thinking I don't remember what's in mine. It's been a while.
I do, because I have it. But
Oh. I feel like the personal statement was really difficult to write, and it took a lot of refining and having, I think I had a couple of my letter writers read it as well, to make sure that it was what it needed to be. But it's hard to write about yourself in that way for the programs. You want to make sure you don't have cliche statements in there.
Yeah.
So definitely get other people to read it as well. That's most of what I remember.
yeah, I know one that I was working on with a student the last academic year. There were a lot of cliches in it, and I pointed them out to her, and she got rid of some, but there's only so much I can point out. I'm sure many of your professors would be willing, even if they're not your letter writers, to read your statement and get feedback on it, especially for the ones that I'm writing letters for and I might know more about you. I know if not that one student, maybe Sam or others, but I'll read it and like, you didn't mention this about yourself. You need to put this in there. Like, I know stuff that you did. You might feel uncomfortable putting it in there, but I know it, and I'm like, this is a good thing. You need to put it in there, even though it feels weird to be bragging about yourself. So having people look at it could be a benefit that way, where you might feel braggy, but it also needs to be a little bit like that, but not too much. And generally the professors have looked at more of them than you had, so we can help you. So it's usually something like, why do you want to pursue a graduate degree in this area? Something like that is usually what it is. So it's usually a page or two, and it's generally short and succinct. You can't like mess with the font or the margins, so you really have to fit stuff in there and succinctly, which also would be good to have people look over it. You don't want to have, spelling and grammatical errors. That would be a big problem. You also don't want to accidentally put the wrong school in there. Like, I really want to go to Fresno State because you have a forensic science master's degree. And they'll be like, no, we don't. Are you sure? Because that's not us. So I read letters like that or statements like that, and we're like, well, they don't want to go here, so we're just not going to include that person. Or I think someone said they wanted to do, I think it was something with forensic science and doing like lab stuff and like more science-y, like how forensic technicians would do. Like, they're obviously don't want to go to this program, so we can't accept them because that would be like misleading them. They're thinking that they're going to do that. Maybe it was a mistake and they want to come here, or maybe they just accidentally applied to the program. I don't know, but you need to make sure everything matches up. So that's important as well. You may or may not need to address some shortcomings. It depends, and that's something also that your letter writers can help you with on whether or not you should address those things. Let's see what else. Generally, for maybe psych programs or PhD programs, you want to talk about the research that you've done. So in the lab or the honors program or McNair, whatever you're a part of, and the research that you've conducted or project that you've done, those types of things. But for a master's program, you're just talking about why you want to get that advanced degree. What has led you there? What do you want to do with your career? That kind of stuff is going to be in your letter. And for PhD programs, in your letter, you're going to put who you're interested in working with for that school. So for Sam's letter, for Sam's personal statement for George Mason, in there, it likely said something about wanting to work with Dr. Redlick because of wanting to study, mental health courts and plea decision making and that kind of stuff. So it shows like, yes, I did my homework. This is who I want to do it work with, because of these reasons. But for master's programs, you don't do that. You just say why you want to go to that school, and you need to make sure that your reason makes sense with what the program does. So again, you don't say that we're studying forensic science in our criminology master's program, because that's not what it is. So you need to look at the website, see what the classes are like, see what the, you know, the program is, and make sure that you make it match and the stuff that you're going to learn about and that kind of thing. So you want to make, basically you want to make the school feel special and like they're the only school that you want to go to, even though that's not true, right? You're writing multiple personal statements for all the schools, and likely for all 10, Sam wrote that she really wants to go to those schools and made it seem like those are the perfect schools for her. In reality, that's not the case. You have your favorites, but you make the schools feel special. So just keep that in mind, make the schools feel special. They're what you want to do and why you want to go to that school and why that's the best school for you and all that kind of thing. Don't say things like, I really want to help people and make a difference. Yeah, that might be the case, but it's a cliche and we roll our eyes. So don't say that. Say it a different way, avoid it. Who knows, but avoid those cliches. Keep it professional. Don't tell us about your struggles and your, I don't know. I can't even think of good examples right now. Just keep it professional. Tailor your letter or your personal statement to the program. I already talked about that. Make them feel real special, that you want to work there and who with and why. 2 pages at most, typed, no typos, no grammar problems. Ask professors to review it, but give it to us a week before it's due. You need to give us some time. We might need to go through a few drafts. I'll say, I'm thinking of one guy's statement in particular. I wrote a lot on a lot of his drafts to get it into a better state. So give yourself time to have a better statement. CV is your academic resume. It's a special format, not a format, it's not a form, it is a format. It's like a resume, but it's only for academic type things. And I have some examples that I'll show you, but it has your educational history, coursework that might be relevant, any research or teaching experience, honors or awards that you have, memberships in different professional organizations, like are you in POA or Alpha Phi Sigma, mock trial, who knows, GPA, GRE score. And you may need to include this with your applications. Maybe you just want to include it, or sometimes it might be required. I think maybe it's more likely to be required with a PhD program than a master's, but if you're asked about a CV, that's what they look like. So this is an example of one. Just like a resume though, it could look different across people. So the way it looks necessarily doesn't matter. It's the stuff that it has on it, but think about it like a resume. One person's resume could look different from the next, but the same kind of stuff is on it. So this is an example from a psychology honors society, but it's got the same stuff on it where it has your name and your address, the education you had, any kind of grants or honors or scholarships, and then research experience or internship experience, job experience that would be applicable to your whatever you're applying to. So would I include my TJ Maxx job on it? No, unless it's maybe loss prevention and you're going to be applying to a criminology program. Maybe you could kind of show those to be similar. But if you don't think it's that applicable, then I wouldn't put it on there. Same with volunteer stuff. If it's not that applicable, I wouldn't put it on there. But when in doubt, you can ask people for their feedback. And definitely, if you have to include this in your application, or you want to, I would also give this to a professor to look at, because we could find typos or have you put things in there that you might have not put in, that kind of thing, help you, whatever the case might be. Okay, money. What does this mean? Usually in PhD programs, there's some kind of financial support that is built in because they want your primary job to be doing research and being at school. So for me, I did not have to pay tuition while I was at FIU, so it was out of state, right? I didn't have to pay tuition, and I paid fees, which was maybe $600 a semester, and that was all I was paying, with like a book here and there, right? Most of it is articles. And then they gave me a part-time job that was usually a TA that paid like $19,000 a year, which isn't much in Miami, but they give you a menial salary and they want you to just be focused on school. And that's like the point of it. They even went as far as to say you cannot do anything more than occasional babysitting. That's against the rules, which I laughed at and I didn't follow. But, you know, they want you to finish, and they think if you have a job, then you won't finish. With criminology programs, it might be a little bit different depending on the type of program, because they might have people like in the field doing stuff potentially, but mostly with PhD programs, that's how it's going to work. Do you want to add anything to that, Sam?
Yeah, I would say like at Mason, it's the same thing where we're not allowed to work outside of our hours. As on our assistantship, we're allowed to work an additional 9 hours a week, but it has to be approved by the department. And so they do keep track of that. And I know, so at Mason, it's a little less secure than at other programs as well. So you really have to know kind of how the financial setup at the school is going in. Mason does it where some people come in and they don't have secure funding, and you kind of just have to find faculty that might take you on with a grant or something like that. Other cases, they have sort of scholarships that work as assistantships where you're guaranteed funding for a number of years. But it is important to know how funding works at the universities that you're interested in beforehand, because it's not the same across.
Yeah, that's
disciplines.
true. I feel like stuff is not necessarily getting better in that regard too. So I think by the time I was leaving, they were saying that probably for 4 years you could be supported, but after that, you might have to be paying more. So asking those questions, like she said, after you're already accepted, before you say that you'll go there, you ask those questions. So it's not necessarily something I would ask beforehand. But once you're accepted, you can start looking into those things more. I mean, you can always look beforehand, I guess, but those are things that I would ask once I already know they're accepting, versus thinking about 10 programs, financial situations, only asking the ones that you potentially might go to, and understanding, you know, is there summer funding, and what is the likelihood of a professor putting you on their grant and supporting you that way, and that kind of thing.
I would say, I would also add that once you've been accepted, talk to current students and get their take on things as well. Definitely don't just ask the department, but also ask current students.
That's true. Hopefully the current students will actually tell you for real what's happening, and not just like, oh yeah, it's wonderful, you know, because you want to get the true story that's happening. Same with the master's program, but master's, I mean, in terms of like talking to students, I mean, the financial situation is different. Usually you are paying, and it's, I know Dr. Pickering, when she talks at this point, she, like I said, was at a master's program, and she did find a way to have her like a job and be supported while she was at Nevada, at Reno. I think there's just different ways that you can look for potential jobs or ways of being supported. Like I think she did research at a school of education, so it wasn't related to what she was doing for school, but she found a way to be supported. So there's always opportunities like that, either as a PhD student or a master's student. You just have to look for them, but there aren't that many for master's students. So it's not like all master's students have the ability to be supported. I'm trying to remember I wonder if I have it somewhere else. It might be on a different slide. Let me see if I have it on, I'm curious if I have it on my other one, because I would always ask Dr. Marshall about, so I have my whole letter for letters of recommendation all in there. It's all the students that I write letters for. Grad comps, grad school stuff. Oh, grad school talks. Okay. I would always ask her how much it costs. And then I feel like I wrote it down on one of these two. So maybe it's in this one. And one time I wrote down what the Alliant one was too. And I don't know where that is. Think of questions while I'm searching my notes here. CV, money, okay. There we go. So I asked Dr. Marshall, and for Fresno State, she said it's about $3,500 a semester for a crim at Fresno State. And then when Alliant came one time, we allowed them to come to talk to our students. Their PsyD is $43,000 a year for 4 to 5 years. So that is a for-profit school. Remember I said PsyDs are a little bit easier to get into than clinical programs. They're more of like a money-making kind of thing. You still get a degree, but it's going to be more expensive. So that's very expensive. For me, I paid, like I said, less than $2,000 a year in terms of I didn't pay tuition, but fees. So that was kind of different stuff to think about. But now I might have to pay more just because financial stuff changes. But these are just things to keep in mind for what kind of money you could be looking at. Some schools offer research assistantships or teaching assistantships, which basically just means that the school gives you money as a part-time job. So I think Sam started off as a research assistant. She got to choose who she did research with, and they gave her money to do that. And then I started off as a teaching assistant to a professor for a few years, and he told me what he wanted me to do. I went to lectures. I taught classes when he wasn't there. He had me grade some things. It's supposed to be at most 20 hours a week. For a TA, I didn't work that much, but some people do work the full 20, so it just depends. Anything to add to that?
I don't think so.
Okay. So this is like timetable if you're like starting from scratch and what you might want to do. I know a lot of you are generally farther along than freshman year. But basically, one thing that you want to do regardless is keep your grades up. Regardless of if you're a senior or if you're a freshman, your grades are important. So always have that as one of your primary concerns, and don't get hopefully too sidetracked with social things or anything else, and make sure that you're concentrating on your grades. That's what I would say a lot of the stuff. I don't remember where I got this whole timetable now that I think about it, but you can kind of look over this stuff. I'd say between your junior and senior year, as it says here, that you start reviewing and studying for the GRE, and maybe saving money for those graduate school applications and the GRE and that kind of stuff, so that you start studying these types of different things. And you're, I would say, investigating schools that you want to look at, but maybe that's, oh, here's the summer. Prepare and take the GREs, sign up, oops, going all the way over. Conduct literature searches on faculty members at different schools that you're going to be applying to. So that's what Sam was saying about looking for research she's interested in, and schools of where they work, and the type of research that they do or are doing currently, and that kind of thing for PhD programs. For master's programs, you can think about either if it's like a FBS type thing, there's a list of schools that I'll show you that has master's programs in it, that could be somehow that you look across the country, or if you know you want to stay in California, you look at the CSUs and see which of the CSUs have master's programs and what you're interested in, and that's a good way to go. So there's different ways you can look for master's programs. You could just Google master's programs in criminology, see what comes up, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different ways to do it for master's programs. Let's see what else. So fall semester of your senior year, talk to faculty members about different graduate programs. You never know if one of us have been to them or know people there that we can put you in touch with. Make your final list of schools you're going to apply to. Take the GRE if you haven't already in summer. Make sure that you know how to request transcripts and figure out how that has to all work out, because usually they have to be mailed, but maybe now there's some official email transcripts that can happen. I wouldn't even say near the end of the semester ask professors to write. I would say even earlier than that if you can do it. But if you know that you're going to be applying, you could even reach out to us sooner, because what if I say no, then you have to find someone else. So you want to figure out who the people are, and what you might need to get them for them to agree or not agree to be a letter writer for you. So that might be a little bit more than just 1 month that you have to work on. And then make sure that you have all the deadlines right. So if it's December, you got to make sure everything is in on or before that deadline. You can turn stuff in sooner. How does it work after that? So after you have applied to the schools, it could be for, like we said, starting in December, could be January, February, March, April. I think Fresno State's like April 1st or April 15th at the master's program, somewhere around there. So you send all of your applications in, and then you might end up finding where you are getting into places. You might want to go visit the schools, or they might fly you out there. Maybe Sam, talk about that part for you.
Yeah, so some schools, they will tell you if you're accepted first, and then we'll fly you out there for sort of a visiting day before you make your decision. And other schools will have you fly out for interviews before they've made their decision. Some schools will reimburse you for that travel. Some schools won't. So some of it has to be out of pocket. In other ways, you can do it over Skype and things like that. I think they can be a little flexible, especially right now. But yeah, during those visiting days or the interview process, you generally talk with every faculty member in the department. And so you have to be prepared to know what their research is, to have sort of a little speech prepared about yourself, why you want to go to grad school, why you want to be in their program, what things you're interested in, and things like that.
Right, and so that again is for a PhD program kind of situation. For a master's school or master's program, since I'm on the committee, at least for Fresno State, I know how we do it. So we look at applications as soon as they're available to us. You apply to the graduate school, which isn't like directly sending everything to the crim department. So the graduate school at Fresno State has to give us access, which happens a few weeks later. And then we get together, we look at everything, and then the head of the graduate program, which starting as soon as school starts, is Dr. Pickering now instead of Dr. Marshall. She will send out emails letting people know that they've been accepted into the program. So there's not interviews for us, there's not flying people out or anything like that. You're just notified that you're accepted. So master's programs aren't going to have as much in it like that as PhD programs, but as this whole thing, we like to show you or tell you about what happens for both. For PhD candidates, they are not candidates. For PhD programs, you have to let them know what school you're going to by April 1st, because it's possible that Sam wants to go to George Mason, but she applied to 10 schools, and so as soon as she says that she's going to George Mason, then this other school will be able to give Sam's spot to somebody else on the waiting list. So it's very important that there's a point in time for the PhD programs that people have to make decisions, and then waiting list people can be let in. And I am not ashamed to say that I got into a school that I was on the waiting list for, and that I turned down a school that I was their first choice because it wasn't a good fit for me. So it doesn't matter if you're on the waiting list. You'll still get in. They have to judge you on things like GRE, at least at that time. And I'm not the best test taker in that for the standardized tests. So, it's fine. All right. Anything else? Start as early as you can, wherever you're at now, just start thinking about it. Start thinking about schools, or if you want to get involved in research because you're not ready to apply, or maybe you're going to be applying in the fall or spring. And so what do you need to make that happen? Start thinking about who your letter writer is going to be. Start looking at programs that you might like. For me, there's just so much out there and I didn't really know what to do. And so I had a list and I would write down programs that I looked at and I didn't like versus ones that I might want to look at again later, so I don't look at the same schools multiple times, because I was looking at, I don't even know how many. So there's different things like that you just can start looking, and maybe just write stuff down, look at them later, cross them off lists, that kind of thing. Do your research, as Sam talked about before, and finding different people that you want to work with, or different programs for master's programs that might be interesting to you, or if you want to be in the state or around a certain geographical location, or you want the subject matter in particular to fit, so you're looking across the country, these things matter. You want to apply to several programs. That you don't want to just apply to one and hope that it works, especially for PhD. That's probably not the best route. But you don't want to apply to like 20 or 30 necessarily either. So there's some kind of sweet spot in between, but it's up to you and what you can financially do and that kind of thing that we talked about before. Talk with faculty and advisors. So faculty is probably going to be the best for graduate programs versus like the advising center, because they don't necessarily know about the different graduate programs like we do. So I would definitely say talking to us more than them. And we're happy to talk about those things. And that's also why I started doing these. I think Sam's was maybe the first year that I ended up doing it. And I got Dr. Arndorfer to start doing it with me. But just to let you guys know more about it, because nobody was really talking about it. So to give you information to then let you know you can reach out to us. And then, like we said, maybe reaching out to professors that you might want to work with, especially if you're applying to PhD programs. If they're going to be taking graduate students, we talked about. And then it's also possible that you might be going to a conference, which sometimes Sam in her senior year was going to a few conferences with me because she was doing research with me. So it's possible that if she knew that Dr. Redlick was going to be there, that she could have like met with her and chatted with her in person at one of these conferences. So that's what that last part means on the slide here. But you don't need to be going to conferences to meet them or anything. That's just what that means if you're going anyways. And then I found this, which I thought was particularly humorous, but also important, so that you guys pay attention to this, and it's important. What are the bad things that professors are seeing? This is research done by, I don't remember who, but I could look it up. I wrote myself down. This is different themes from 88 respondents, like people in charge of graduate school admissions at various different universities. And so what is the biggest problem that they would see? Damaging personal statements. So that's why I say personal statements are a really big deal. And I already told you about a few that I've read that were like, well, no, because they don't even know what program this is. They're making errors. They can't even write a personal statement correctly. I don't want to read their papers, you know. So discussing your mental health is probably not a good thing. Then we're wondering if we want the problems like that, it probably wouldn't be a good fit. Or they're just so, altruism is like, you're such a good person and want to help people. You know, eye roll kind of stuff. Too much self-disclosure, just being unprofessional. Those are the top things that were discussed in the damaging personal statement. Flawed letters of recommendation. Inappropriate references would be like your mom or your Taco Bell shift leader, something like that. That's not appropriate for the things that the graduate schools want, or just unsuitable things in those letters. So that's why I say ask for a positive letter, those kind of things. Lack of program fit. So that also fits with the damaging personal statement that I gave you an example of, saying that we're a forensic science program when we are not. So we're not going to accept that person. Poor writing and grammar, which could be in lots of these different areas, personal statement or anything else you might be writing. And then any other tacky attempts to impress. One of them that we have recently was somebody sent in like 15 letters of recommendation. Like, what is the purpose of that? And that can't be real. How would anybody know that many people to have them write letters of recommendation for them? I don't even think I could get 15 letters of recommendation. So just that kind of stuff is like, why are they doing that? And that's kind of fishy, is what we think when we see that. but just some other ways to highlight the importance of, you know, the personal statement and the letter of recommendation along with these other things. I think that's it for my slideshow. I know it's a lot. Every time we do this, it's overwhelming for people, and we know that. But it's a lot of information at once, and that's really what it is. But we present it all to you because we want you to have all of the information and to be able to plan for yourself. So although you might feel overwhelmed right now, just take a breather, just let it sink in, and you'll be that much more prepared for when you do apply, if you do want to apply. And at the very least, you can remember Dr. K said something about this. I'm going to reach out and ask her a question, or you have, I'll send this stuff to you again. Like I said before, you can look through these things, but we want you to be prepared, or I do, I guess, at this point. I'm sure Sam does as well, to hopefully get in where you want to get in. If you want to go to graduate school, that's what this purpose is. So we'll open up now to questions to me or to Sam as a previous Fresno State graduate. For those that might have come in later, Sam is a previous FBS graduate and is now at a PhD program, recently finished her master's thesis. So she's got a couple years left before she's done with grad school. So she's been in your shoes, went through the process. So any questions for either of us, we're here. Otherwise, you can email me.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of for both of you guys. Did you guys both apply to only PhD programs, or both, like just master programs and also PhD programs?
I feel like I maybe applied to one master's program, but I don't remember. I'm not sure. Do you remember?
I only applied to PhD programs because I was worried about financially applying to master's programs. And so my plan was that if I didn't get into a PhD program, I'd work on building my application sort of for a year and then reapply to PhD programs because I was a little worried about paying out of pocket for masters.
That's a good point. I didn't talk about it, but my students that I've had from FIU, when I was going there, I had students that were my research assistants that I would write letters, and they wouldn't necessarily, especially they were both the ones I'm thinking of, wanted clinical programs, and those are very difficult to get into. So one applied twice, another applied 3 years in a row, finally got into a really good school. But it's possible that if you especially want to do the clinical route, that you might have to take a few years and build your resume in various ways. And you can ask people like myself, what do you think I could do to make myself look attractive or more attractive to programs to apply again in the future? So that's possible depending on what you want to do. If you are open to starting out either way, I would say apply to as many of both that you can to potentially go to a master's program or go to a PhD program. I don't know why I didn't. I don't really have a good answer, but I also might have forgotten. So, you know me, my brain doesn't work. Let's see, Sam and Dr. K, how do you figure out housing given that they're out of state? You take that one first.
So that was one thing I was really worried about because my program was in Virginia and I had never been to Virginia before. I came for a visiting day after I found out I had been accepted, but I was here for about 24 hours, not enough time to look around at anything. So what I ended up doing was my program had graduate student housing that I could apply for, and I got accepted into before I moved here. So that was one thing that was really nice, was just knowing where I was going to live and that it was all set up before I got here. I know other people, generally I talk with incoming students who have similar questions, and usually the advice that we give them is just to talk with current students, find out what the area is like, find out where a lot of the grad students in the program tend to live, maybe you could do like virtual tours or things like that of different places to live. But that is an issue. Moving out of state is kind of where to find housing.
Yeah. I know for mine, there weren't any like really good options for graduate student housing, and the students in my program said that they would definitely not support living there unless you didn't have a car, which I knew I would have a car. So I had somebody that I stayed with the day that I visited, and he helped me find an apartment. Like he actually went and looked at it for me, and then he let like my stuff in because I wasn't there when my stuff arrived from California. And so he let it in. So I just had a graduate student help me out, and he was willing to do that. And he found an apartment for me in the area that, well, I found it and he looked at it, I guess. But I didn't see it myself until I was actually there moving in. So that was a little bit weird and uneasy, but kind of stuff you have to do. But if there's graduate student housing that look like people say is okay, I would do that for sure. But it turned out okay for me, although I did end up having to sue that landlord. But it lasted pretty well for a while. But yeah, it's difficult, but definitely like talking to the graduate students that are there, I find that people don't mind doing that, and we want to help each other. Like I was willing to talk to other graduate students and help them figure it out, or maybe they need a roommate and you want to live with them for a year, even though that's kind of weird to live and go to school with the same people. But at most it's a year, and then you can find another situation once you've been there for a year.
And that can be
think of
telling about the program as well. If you have grad students that are not willing to help or anything like that, it can be a sign of maybe a very competitive program that's not as great.
Maybe you don't want to be there if
Maybe
they're not willing to help you figure out where to live.
Because generally, in my experience, grad students current students are usually pretty willing to help, because we've all been in that position before.
Right, Sabrina?
So in regards to like getting in touch with current students, how do you go about that? Like how do you find current students to talk to?
For me, once I was there, either visiting, I got their information, and oftentimes when you visit, at least when I would go, they would students would volunteer to have you stay in their apartments or their houses, so you were already like in contact with them, or you are in contact with the professor who's emailing you about like being accepted, and then you ask them for any students that might be willing to talk to you. And oftentimes they'll just ask their own students that they work with, and then that student might give you the information of other student friends that they have, and you can just kind of get information that way. But usually you probably don't learn or talk to the current students until after you've been accepted, but it is possible to talk to them beforehand, I guess, but I would think about that afterwards. Sam, what'd you do?
I believe it was after I was accepted, I ended up talking with Dr. Redlick, who put me in touch with her current student, who is a good friend of mine now in the lab, and she put me in touch with other students as well. Another option is a lot of programs have graduate directors or graduate coordinators, and you can just email them and ask if they would be willing to share the contact information for current students. I know our grad director will send around emails to a handful of students around admissions time to talk with potential students.
Yeah. Also, actually, sometimes there's like either program websites or lab websites, and you can find student emails that way. Like I bet if you went to Dr. Redlick's lab, you might find Sam's information on that website that you could just do that without even talking to Dr. Redlick. So there's ways like that. I think on my graduate program website, when I was there, it listed me and it had my email address, so you could just find me on the website. So there might be programs like that, but not all of them might put their graduate students' email addresses online. Other questions? I don't think of anything else that I missed that I usually say. It went longer than I thought, but hopefully it was helpful, not too overwhelming. Like I said, if you have questions later, you want to talk to Sam later, talk to me later, send me an email. You guys all have my email. I'm gonna post this on my YouTube and send it out to the people that asked for it, but if you want this as well to look at later, just email me and I can send it to you as well. Or maybe I'll just send it out anyways, I don't know, but I have this to look at. All right, thanks for coming.
Thank you for the
And